Here we go. John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel, always bringing it. I'm Dave Hooker, and it's the Ball Report brought to you by Viles Automotive Group and Big Orange Phillies. Tell you more about them as we go on. We're going to break down the SEC dominance after the college football playoff final, in which Georgia, they won pretty convincingly, and it kind of makes me wonder where you would stack Tennessee. And if they did the playoffs all over based off what we have seen, where would Tennessee rank? So let me start with this before we dig into it. Head to head is the most simple thing in the world, right? Would you agree with that, John?
Yes, I do.
So, how is Alabama still ahead of Tennessee?
Because not everybody that votes in these polls thinks that way. They just don't. And they say, well, we got to look at the whole season. We can't look at just one game. I know. But if you take the SEC standings and two teams have the same record in conference play, what do? They go to head to head. I mean, it's not complicated. I don't get that. You had your chance on the field, and no matter what happened, whatever your problems were on that day, you still had a chance to win the game, but you lost. So that's the best way to determine this. It's not the only way, but I always, when I voted in the poll, in the AP poll, that's one thing I looked at. Now, if one of the main things, if you have three teams involved and one beat the other, you obviously can't do that. But two teams head to head, it's simple. Tennessee beat Alabama. Yes, it was fortunate to do so. And yes, it was on its own field, but that's what happened. And you can't eliminate that and shouldn't eliminate that.
So, you've been an AP voter before. I've never been asked, but would duck that responsibility like it was the plague. I mean,
Yeah.
I really would, because I spend 2 or 3 hours on my Heisman vote. It means something to me, and I would be the same way with that. Same way with that. I don't have 2 or 3 hours on every Sunday to determine that. I know you feel the same way about it. So, if you knocked out the top five, who would it be?
It'd be Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, Alabama, and Michigan.
Wow, where would you put T?
No, I would have to put TCU. I'm sorry, I'm contradicting myself. TCU beat Michigan. I don't care how bad TCU looked and how bad it lost to Georgia. It was so bad. I felt as though I was witnessing a crime being committed. Like somebody got off a subway and then just got assaulted by a bunch of people.
Yeah,
So, yeah, but no, I would still go with it. I mean, you got to give TCU credit. It beat Michigan.
yeah, it's like voluntary frog slaughter.
Yeah. Hey, let's dissect these frogs like we used to do in biology class. And then I found out that my biology teacher or who was he'd gather up all these frogs and he'd have a big frog fry.
Yeah.
Family and friends. So yeah, I just it was just absolutely brutal. So that's why and again, you go back. I don't think there's any nobody nobody thinks Georgia isn't the best team. And I will say that Ohio State outplayed Georgia and deserved to win that game, but it didn't win it. And I also think Georgia, that was an off day for Georgia, and it still won. And I think if it played Ohio State next week, it'd win by 10 to 14 points. But I give Ohio State all the credit. It's number two. I give Tennessee I'd give Tennessee credit because yeah, it lost to Georgia and it got hammered by South Carolina, but it beat some good teams and it beat Alabama. Therefore, I have Tennessee at three, and I also give Tennessee credit for pretty much handling Clemson in that 31-14 Orange Bowl. Then I come back with Alabama, which whipped up on Kansas State, the Big 12 champion, have it at number four. That would be my 14 playoff if we did the playoff now after all this. So maybe that's what you should do. You have a playoff, and then you say, okay,
All
now
right.
we know who's pretty good, who can handle a big stage. Now we do our real playoff.
Yeah, I think that's called the 12-team playoff. We're still a while away from that, but
Yeah.
we'll get there. Why Tennessee is the best hope for an unboring 2023 football season. First, I want to remind you, Viles Automotive Group is fantastic. The epicenter of car shopping right there on Callahan in Knoxville. You've got to make the drive there, and it's not far at all. It's very convenient off the interstate. Save you a lot of money, have an incredible car selection. They want, they need, and they appreciate your business and their car service. Wow. Talk about getting the correct assessment on your car and not overpaying for stuff you don't need. That's Viles Automotive Group. It is fantastic on Callahan. So if you look at Georgia's schedule, German chocolate cake. I mean, that is absolute cake. It is so incredibly easy. They'll be 7-0 going into a bye. And when I look at it, the only real way that Georgia gets somehow upended from being back in the SEC championship game and likely playing in the college football playoff again is Tennessee. I don't know that any other team on their schedule, which is ridiculous, can beat them. So I think the Vols are the one team in the SEC that everybody should root for so that you don't see a boring SEC, John.
Well, I agree with you. The schedule, Georgia had a tougher schedule this year. It opened with Oregon, which was a pretty good team, and it dismantled at 49-3. Um, yeah, I think Tennessee, because of the way it plays, playing at home, tremendous crowd support. Josh Heupel's got it going offensively, and Tennessee will be better, I think, defensively next year. I mean, if I were putting odds on that game right now, though, I'd set the line at about 13 points, Georgia, favoring Georgia. I mean, I think Georgia on paper could be better next year. Um, y-
Possibly, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's got some real star power coming back. And I think Tennessee will be really good too. If Georgia lost to Tennessee and went 11-1, Tennessee played in the SEC championship game, Georgia still might sneak into the playoff and haven't helped the rest of the teams in the field next year because I think Carson Beck will be its quarterback. I think he's pretty good and got a lot of surrounding talent. But I think when you look at the East next year, I thought the SEC East it was 8-6 against the West, which was quite a switch this past season. I don't know that the SEC East will be as good overall. That's why I think Tennessee can win 10 games. I would have it behind Georgia, certainly. 1-2 in the SEC East. That third team, to me, there's going to be a distance between Tennessee and the third place team, whomever that might be. Florida, maybe, possibly South Carolina.
What team is Tennessee's biggest threat in the SEC East other than Georgia? Brought to you by Big Orange Phillies. Big Orange Phillies has fantastic food. They're right there on Maynardville Pike and North Knoxville. They're close to the Halls area, also close to Maynardville. You got to get to Big Orange Phillies. They also have billiards. They've got darts. They've got everything you need there at Big Orange Phillies on Maynardville Pike. Simply awesome. Check them out. The food is fantastic. So in the SEC East, I know you'll do your official prediction in August at SEC Media Days, but the 1-2 seems pretty simple to me. You've got Georgia, of course, you've got Tennessee, and then I guess we could discuss Kentucky, but they don't have Will Levis, who didn't play well, but is predicted to be a first round draft pick for some reason. And then you have South Carolina, who, of course, closed the season strong and ended Tennessee season. But who's Tennessee's most feared foe, you think, with the exception of Georgia in the SEC East?
Good question. I would probably go with Florida simply because it's got to play Florida in Gainesville and it's had a horrible time there in the swamp, as so many other teams have. But when you look ahead to the next season, you always have to look at quarterback. In today's game, if you don't have a good quarterback, you can forget a championship. And I'm not sure you can even think about finishing second in a division as in one of the SEC divisions. Kentucky's added Devin Leary of North Carolina State, and he's really good. He's put up some really good numbers. Was hurt this past season, played half a season, was really good 2 years ago. Also added Vanderbilt's running back. So yeah, those are nice pickups, but I just don't like Kentucky's overall depth chart right now. I didn't like it that much in 22. And you saw how good it was against Tennessee. That was almost a Georgia TCU beating. So yeah,
Cat
I just kind of, huh?
that would be cat slaughter, voluntary cat slaughter.
Yes. And that's, I don't know. I like cats, so I would dislike that. I would prefer a frog slaughter. That just seems fine because a lot of times I've been driving at night through southern part of Illinois or somewhere. So there's this area of the country. It's like Illinois, Kentucky, some other states in there. I don't know, Missouri or somebody, and it's just weird. And all these little frogs just kept hopping in front of my car, and I'm massacring them, which was kind of like what happened last Monday night. Georgia, Georgia should have been driving a car. Stetson Bennett should just got in a car and just drove over TCU's defense.
That's exactly what they needed. Brought to you by Biles Automotive Group on Callahan, the epicenter of car buying, selling, and car service. Big Orange Phillies on Maynardville Pike, great food and more. Watch the NFL playoffs right there at Big Orange Phillies, as you will be very entertained. You'll enjoy it and family friendly. I don't ever want to forget to mention that family friendly. We've been there; it's fantastic, and check out the food. So, um, John, we talked a little bit before about Tennessee's schedule. It certainly shapes up for another fantastic season. I wonder what you think that Vegas will put the early odds out on the Vols in terms of an over under. I think it was 7.5, which I thought was one of the easiest over unders of the entire SEC. I would I would say it's probably going to be 9. I don't know that it'll get to 9.5, but what do you think?
I think 9.5. Lose to Alabama and Georgia. I'm not saying it will lose to both, but I mean those are games in which it'll be an underdog. I think it could be favored in all the other games. I don't think will be an underdog against Florida, even though it's in the swamp. Um, but you know, the South Carolina game is a great reminder. Usually, when you think, okay, what's the optimal record a team would have, and I say I think Tennessee will be 10-2. Well, usually you're probably safe to just then give it another loss and say 9-3. But it went the other way with Tennessee this year. I thought it'd be 9-3. A lot of people thought 8-4. So based on my criteria, you should say, okay, John, drop it down to 8-4. Instead, Tennessee overachieved by that measurement and was 10-2. So I just think now I just don't I don't see a lot of really strong challenges in the East. I know there a South Carolina game can always happen, but gosh, the non-conference schedule, there's no Pittsburgh next year. I mean, we look back on that season, that Pitt game was a really tough game and a real challenge for Tennessee. It pulled it out in overtime, had to come from behind. There's no Pittsburgh on the schedule. Virginia in the opener. Yeah. Virginia's just challenged offensively. And if you're challenged offensively in today's game, then there's a potential for, well, I'll use your description, a frog massacre occurring. I think we should use that in future when we see a huge beatdown. It could be a frog massacre. Yeah, that's what could happen in Virginia.
Poor Sonny Dykes and Max Duggan. They've done so many great things for
I
themselves.
know.
And now we're turning this into an actual thing.
Yeah, but it looking back, it should have lost in the final seconds to Michigan. And then everybody would say, what a great accomplishment. Came back from a losing team, reached the college football semifinals, held your own against a Big Ten power. Look at you, man. I'm picking you to win the Big 12 next year. Now I'm wondering if they'll even field a team next year. That's how bad that loss was.
I think they'll fill the team. The SEC, is it just too darn good? And we're talking about Georgia being dominant. We're talking about Alabama, and as far as those Nick Saban retiring rumors, put that to rest because he just signed the number one team in the nation. Um, and now Tennessee appears to be at the elite level I it looks like when they start the college football playoff, which is 2024, correct? It
Yeah.
yeah, it looks like a lock that the SEC is gonna have 3 teams in, and I know they'll try to spread them out where they don't play each other until the last possible game, but based off what I've seen, I think it's gonna be the SEC in the finals pretty consistently.
Yeah, the only thing that could change that, Dave, is when you get into a 12-team playoff, another round or so of competitive games, well, almost competitive. When you get into that, the possibility of injury enters into this.
Well,
You
that's true.
don't know. I mean, you lose your quarterback, for example, in the first round. You win the first round, but lose your quarterback. I mean, you're probably not going to make the championship game.
But John, I would argue this: if you lose your quarterback, if TCU had lost Max Duggan, they're done. If Georgia loses Stetson Bennett, got a fantastic young man who's ready to step in for them. Same for Tennessee. I know we had questions about Joe Milton, and I still do, but that's an incredibly talented athlete. To me, the fall off between the haves and the frog sicker have nots are that's going to be as drastic at quarterback as any other position.
Yeah, you're right, and that's why when you talk about next season in the SEC, I mean, you naturally say Georgia, Alabama, then you might throw Tennessee and LSU. Right now, I think LSU is right there behind Georgia. I would have LSU ahead of Alabama. I think it will win the West again. Why? Because it has a quarterback. In fact, it has 2 quarterbacks, and I'm not sure Alabama has one. Not the kind that can win an SEC division.
Well, interesting to see how things play out. I think uh, Bryce Young I thought he should have been a two-time Heisman Trophy winner. That's
I
who
agree.
I mean. I just I think he is one of those. I don't want to say once in a generation, but at least once in a decade type of player. I think he's that good. I think he's going to have success in the NFL. Speaking of, what did you think of uh, Josh Dobbs and his display? To me, there you could talk about the mistakes he made, but that offense is incredibly limited for a number of reasons. I got big time kudos for that young man for hanging around and being a part of meaningful games at this 6-year point in his career. A lot of people hang it up way before that. They throw the clipboard down, and kudos to that young man.
Yeah, there are some other guys like that in the NFL, and I respect him. A guy that can come in and start when your QB is injured, and he moved past Malik Willis. I don't understand why the Titans ever drafted him, but that's another story. I got to remember Joshua Dobbs is smart, and he was there with the Titans for a couple of weeks, and he was able to pick up the offensive system, which isn't complicated, granted, but it's still a pro system. Its offensive system is hand the ball to Derrick Henry and then do that again and again and again and again. But Joshua Dobbs, he doesn't have a great receiving core. I thought he did okay, and I give him a lot of credit for hanging around. I mean, just to be on an NFL roster,
Oh,
it's really hard. I mean, you got to be really good just to make an NFL roster, even if you don't play. I just think it's extremely challenging. And when you think about it, that's the hardest position in sports is an NFL quarterback. I mean, it really is. What all is expected and asked of those guys, and he was able to come in and start for the Titans, but just to be a backup on an NFL roster, that's really an accomplishment. I hope he hangs in there because I think he's the kind of guy. And you know what? I could see him. If I were an NFL team, I would look at him. And if I'm the San Francisco 49ers or somebody like that, or the Baltimore Ravens, I would covet Joshua Dobbs as backup quarterback because he can run. He's a strong runner and he doesn't break down. We saw that in college. He can hang in there. He's durable. There's a system for him.
Oh, I agree. If the Titans find an offensive coordinator that can make his way home without getting arrested, then hey, maybe they can do something.
But wouldn't you like to see Derrick Henry with a really good team for a year just to see what he would do?
Yeah, and you feel like in the back of your head the clock's ticking because
Oh,
NFL,
yeah.
I mean, they just don't last.
I know, but the guy looks like a NFL defensive end. He looks like if you made J.J. Watt say, "Okay, you're gonna be a running back this year." I mean, he's extraordinary. He's one of the greatest running backs of all time in the NFL.
Yeah, somebody on this podcast wrote on ESPN.com that he should play defensive end. That somebody may be an idiot, and it's his name's Dave. He's John Adams. I thought that was the best way. He would be anyway. He would be an all-pro defensive end too.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
but you have to admit, I mean, he just comes up with he approaches defenders, and it's kinda like, should I really try to tackle him? I mean, I gotta think of my career.
yeah, it's a great point. He's John Adams. I'm Dave Hooker. The Vol Report with John brought to you by Viles Automotive Group and Big Orange Phillies. Have a fantastic day, everyone. We will see you next week. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports.